A $12,000 first-class ticket, a 7-hour flight, a multi-billion-dollar deal on the line. For Serafina Vance, it was just another Tuesday. But as she settled into seat 1A, a passenger named Caroline Harrington looked at her designer hoodie, looked at her black skin, and decided she didn't belong. "You're in my seat," she sneered, stealing it. But Caroline had no idea who she was provoking. She didn't just pick a fight with a billionaire. She picked a fight with the one woman who owned the technology that kept the plane in the air. And in seconds, her entitled little world wasn't just going to collapse. It was going to ground the entire flight. The air in JFK's Terminal 7 first-class lounge was thick with the scent of stale espresso and the self-satisfied murmur of the elite. It was 8:00 p.m., and Globalis Air's flagship Flight 10 to London Heathrow was already in a state of rolling delay. For Serafina Vance, the delay was more than an inconvenience. It was a chisel, chipping away at the precious few hours of sleep she'd hoped to steal before the London Energy Summit. At 32, Serafina was the kind of wealthy that defied visual confirmation. She wore no makeup, and her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant bun. Her uniform was a charcoal grey cashmere hoodie from a brand only billionaires recognized, soft black joggers, and a pair of worn but expensive sneakers. On her wrist wasn't a diamond-encrusted watch, but a prototype smartband of her own design, its display dark. She was the founder and CEO of Vance AI, a trillion-dollar company that had quietly, decisively become the brains behind half the world's logistics, energy grids, and most recently, avionics. She was exhausted. A 5-day gauntlet of meetings in Silicon Valley, followed by a tense negotiation in New York, had left her nerves frayed. All she wanted was the cocoon of the Globalis first suite. Seat 1A. She wanted to close the privacy door, take a mild sedative, and not exist for 7 hours. She kept her head down, scrolling through schematics on her phone, ignoring the buzz around her. But one voice, sharp and metallic, cut through the quiet. "I simply cannot believe the standards here. It's like a public market." Serafina didn't look up, but she registered the speaker. A woman in her late 50s, with rigidly coiffed blonde hair, a stiff tweed blazer, and a face locked in a permanent mask of mild offense. This was Caroline Harrington. Caroline was loudly complaining to a tired-looking lounge attendant about the brand of champagne being served. "This is not a Premier Cru. I know the difference," Caroline snapped, shoving the flute toward the attendant. "For what my husband pays for my platinum elite status, I expect actual luxury, not this processing." Serafina sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. It was always the platinum elites, the ones who flew 100,000 miles a year on their company's dime and believed it made them royalty. Serafina, who owned a fleet of private jets, found commercial first class to be a quaint, practical choice for simple A to B trips. It was greener, and it kept her grounded. Or at least, it was supposed to. Caroline Harrington huffed, her phone pressed to her ear. "Richard, you won't believe it. The lounge is packed with... well, it's just not what it used to be. Honestly, I think they're just letting anyone in now." Her eyes flicked pointedly across the lounge, skimming past a family from the Middle East, a young man in a streetwear brand, and finally landing on Serafina. She held her gaze for just a beat too long, her lips thinning in disapproval. Serafina met the look, her expression flat and unreadable. She felt the familiar, weary tightening in her chest. It was the look she'd been getting her whole life. "You don't belong." Caroline, dismissed, turned back to her call. An hour later, the flight was finally called for boarding. "We now invite our first-class passengers, Globalis Concierge Key, and Platinum Elite members to board. Caroline Harrington immediately snapped her phone shut, grabbed her wheeled carry-on, and made a point to be the first one at the gate, cutting in front of an elderly couple. Serafina waited until the entire priority line had passed, gathering her simple backpack. She was the last first-class passenger to walk down the jet bridge. She stepped onto the Airbus A350XLR, a brand-new aircraft. She knew it well. Her company had designed the core software for its navigation. She turned left into the exclusive cabin. There were only 8 suites. She saw Caroline Harrington standing in the aisle next to row 4, arguing with another passenger about overhead bin space. Serafina ignored her, moving to the very front. Seat 1A. The best on the plane. She slid her backpack under the ottoman, sat down on the wide leather seat, and fastened her seatbelt. She closed her eyes, breathing out. 7 hours. The cabin was filling. She heard the flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Maria, greeting passengers. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. 4D is just on your right." Then, the sound of determined, clicking heels approached. Serafina opened her eyes. Caroline Harrington was standing in the archway of her suite, her face a mask of cold fury. "Excuse me," Caroline said, her voice dripping with condensation. Serafina looked up. "Hi, you're in my seat." Serafina Vance was not a confrontational person. She hadn't built her empire by winning shouting matches. She'd built it by being 5 steps smarter, 10 times faster, and infinitely more resilient than everyone else in the room. She calmly unclipped her seatbelt. "I don't believe so," Serafina said, her voice low and steady. "My boarding pass is for 1A. Caroline let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a sound designed to belittle, to reduce. "That's impossible. I am in 1A. You must have misread. You're probably in 10A. Back in business?" She didn't move. She just stood there, blocking the suite, projecting an aura of absolute, unshakable entitlement. The other first-class passengers were trying not to stare, pretending to be busy with their welcome drinks and amenity kits. "Ma'am, I'm quite certain this is my seat," Serafina repeated, holding up her phone, the digital boarding pass clearly displaying, "Vance, Serafina. Seat 1A, Globalis Flight 10. JFK LHR." Caroline didn't even glance at the phone. She was staring at Serafina's hoodie. "I don't know what kind of pass you're using, dear," Caroline said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But this is my seat. I booked it 6 months ago. I am a Platinum Elite member. Now, be a good girl and move along before you make a scene." The condescension was so thick, it was almost impressive. "Dear, good girl, move along." It was a script from a 1950s movie, and Serafina was not in the mood to play her part. "I'm not moving," Serafina said, her voice losing its warmth. "This is my assigned seat. Please check your boarding pass." "I don't need to." Caroline's voice rose, cracking the polite quiet of the cabin. "I know my seat. This is harassment." The flight attendant, Maria, rushed over, her face a practiced mask of professional concern. "Is there a problem, ladies?" "Yes," Caroline snapped, pointing a lacquered fingernail at Serafina. "This woman is in my seat, and she's refusing to move. She probably snuck on." Maria looked from Caroline's furious, mottled face to Serafina's exhausted, calm one. Maria's eyes darted to the boarding pass, still lit on Serafina's phone. She saw 1A, clear as day. "Mrs. Harrington," Maria said soothingly, having recognized the high-maintenance passenger from the lounge. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" "This is ridiculous," Caroline fumed, but she snatched her own phone from her purse, jabbed the screen, and shoved it at Maria. Maria read it and winced. "Ma'am, your seat is 4D, just down the aisle here." The truth, presented so plainly, seemed to break something in Caroline. She looked at Maria, then at Serafina, as if they had conspired to forge her ticket. "No," Caroline said, her voice flat. "That's incorrect. The app must be wrong. I am always in 1A. My husband insures it." "Ma'am, the passenger in 1A is correct," Maria said, her patience thinning. "I need you to please move to 4D so we can continue boarding." "I will not." Caroline Harrington did something Serafina, in all her years of travel, had never seen. She stepped into the suite, grabbed Serafina's backpack from under the ottoman, and tossed it into the aisle. "Get out of my seat!" Gasps rippled through the cabin. Serafina stared at her backpack, which lay open, a highly sensitive hard drive module, half spilled onto the carpet. Serafina rose slowly from her seat. She was several inches taller than Caroline, and suddenly the exhaustion fell away, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged focus. The temperature in the suite seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You had no right to touch my property," Serafina said, her voice lethally quiet. "I'll do more than that if you don't get out," Caroline shouted, and then she sat down in seat 1A. She crossed her legs, folded her arms, and stared straight ahead at the bulkhead. "I'm not moving. Get me the captain. This is my seat. I will not be intimidated by her." Maria, the flight attendant, looked horrified. "Ma'am, you cannot do that. You are assaulting another passenger. I need you to get up now." "No, she is the one causing the disturbance. I am a platinum member. I have rights. Remove her." The aisle was now completely blocked. Boarding had stopped. Passengers from the business class cabin were craning their necks to see what the commotion was. Serafina simply stood in the archway of her own suite, looking down at the woman who had stolen her seat. She felt no anger, just a profound, cosmic tiredness. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number from her favorites. "Maria," Serafina said calmly, not taking her eyes off Caroline. "Please inform the purser and the captain that we have a significant delay. This passenger is refusing to deplane, and we have a security issue." Caroline laughed. "Deplane? I'm not deplaning. You are." Serafina's call connected. "Robert," she said, her voice clear and cutting through the cabin. "It's Serafina Vance. I'm on Globalis 10 at JFK. We have a problem." The use of the name Robert was like a switch. Maria, the flight attendant, froze. She didn't know who Robert was, but the tone Serafina used, not of a complaint, but of a report, was terrifying. Caroline Harrington, however, was unimpressed. She was too deep in her own narrative of victimhood. "Oh, please," Caroline sneered from the stolen seat. "Calling your little boyfriend? He can't help you. You're off this flight. You assaulted me." "Ma'am, you threw her bag," Maria interjected, her voice shaking slightly. "You are the one causing this incident." At that moment, the purser, David, arrived. David was a tall man with a military bearing and zero tolerance for delays. "What is happening here? We are 20 minutes behind schedule." Caroline launched into her tirade. "This woman, she's in my seat. 1A, and this attendant," she spat, pointing at Maria, "is letting her. She's probably using a fake ticket. She called some man named Robert to threaten me." David looked at the manifest on his tablet. He saw Vance S. 1A, VIP CK. The CK stood for Concierge Key, a mythical, invitation-only status far above Platinum. He then looked at Harrington, C, 4D, PLT. He looked at Serafina, who was still standing calmly in the aisle, her phone to her ear. "Yes, Robert, I'm serious. She assaulted me, and is now refusing to leave my assigned seat. No, I'm fine." "But the flight isn't." David turned to Caroline, his face hardening. "Ma'am, you are Caroline Harrington. Your assigned seat is 4D. This passenger, Miss Vance, is in her correct seat. I need you to stand up, retrieve your bag, and move to 4D immediately, or you will be in violation of federal aviation law." "Federal law? Don't you threaten me, young man!" Caroline shrieked. The entire plane was now listening. "I know Robert Chen. I'll have your job. I am a Platinum Elite member. My husband is one of your biggest clients. This is my seat." The name Robert Chen hung in the air. Robert Chen was the global CEO of Globalis Air. David blinked. He'd heard this bluff before. "Ma'am, that doesn't change the manifest. Get up. This is your final warning." "No." Serafina spoke into her phone. "Robert, did you hear that? She's claiming to know you. She's also refusing a direct order from your purser. The plane is still at the gate, but the door is closed. This is a security situation." She listened for a moment. "Yes, I agree." She hung up and looked at David. "The CEO is calling the cockpit directly. He has also authorized airport police to meet the flight." Caroline's face went white, then a dangerous, blotchy red. You bitch! You're lying! You don't know Robert Chen!" "Ma'am!" David shouted, his voice finally booming. "You are done. We are returning to the gate." Just then, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Miller emerged. He was a silver-haired veteran, and his expression was thunderous. He had just gotten off the phone with the head of the airline, who had sounded like he was having a heart attack. "What is going on in my cabin?" he demanded. "Captain," Caroline said, standing up, a triumphant smirk on her face. She thought her threat had worked. "Thank you for coming. This woman has been harassing me." Captain Miller walked right past her and stopped in front of Serafina. "Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice suddenly full of professional courtesy. "I am Captain Miller. I have just been on the phone with Mr. Chen. I am so sorry for this disturbance. Are you all right?" The entire cabin went silent. You could hear the faint whine of the auxiliary power unit, and nothing else. Caroline Harrington's jaw unhinged. She stared, speechless, as the captain of the aircraft apologized to the woman in the hoodie. "I'm fine, Captain," Serafina said, her voice weary. "But I have been assaulted. My property was thrown, and this passenger is refusing to comply with the crew. She is a security risk." Captain Miller turned to Caroline. His face was no longer courteous. It was a block of ice. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dangerously low, "you have interfered with a flight crew. You have assaulted another passenger. You have refused to take your seat. We are returning to the gate, and you will be removed by the authorities." "What?" Caroline whispered. No. She started it. I'm the victim. I'm platinum." "I don't care if you're platinum, titanium, or solid gold," Captain Miller growled. "You're off this aircraft. David, Maria, block her. She's not to move from this spot until the police arrive." Caroline crumpled back into seat 1A, her face a mask of disbelief. You're really kicking me off?" "Absolutely," the captain said. Then Serafina spoke again. "Captain, I'm afraid it's more complicated than that." Everyone turned to her. What could be more complicated? "This isn't just a passenger dispute anymore," Serafina said, picking up her backpack and checking the hard drive. "This passenger has now caused a significant delay and a security breach involving sensitive corporate material." She tapped her backpack. "Ms. Vance, we're handling it," the captain said, wanting to placate her. "I don't think you understand," Serafina said, looking him dead in the eye. "This is Flight 10, correct? The inaugural A350 XLR showcase route." The captain frowned. "Yes, it is. And it's running the new Helios avionics and navigation suite, correct? The one being certified for transatlantic use?" Captain Miller's blood ran cold. He had no idea how she knew that. It was a specialized detail, not public information. "That is correct." Serafina Vance zipped her backpack. "I am Serafina Vance, CEO of Vance AI. We built the Helios suite. My presence on this specific flight is a non-negotiable contractual requirement for its final operational sign-off and insurance. This flight cannot legally take off without me on its manifest and in that seat." She paused, letting the words land. "But due to this incident, the harassment, the assault, my legal team would advise me that Globalis has failed to provide a safe working environment. Therefore, I am voiding my observation." She looked past the captain at the entire stunned cabin. "Seconds later," Serafina said, her voice echoing in the hush. "The flight is grounded. Captain, I'm not flying, which means none of you are. Tell Mr. Chen I'll be in the lounge." For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the recycled air hissing through the vents. Captain Miller, a man who had landed planes in typhoons and handled engine failures over the Atlantic, was for the first time in his 30-year career utterly speechless. He wasn't looking at a passenger. He was looking at the woman who held the multi-million-dollar insurance policy for his entire aircraft in her hands. Vance AI wasn't just a vendor, it was the vendor. The new Helios system was a revolutionary piece of tech that saved Globalis 15% on fuel and was the centerpiece of their new Green Fleet marketing. Its failure or delay would cost the airline billions. "Ms. Vance," Captain Miller said, his voice strained, "please, let's reconsider. The passenger is being removed. We can depart right after." "Reconsider?" Serafina's voice was sharp, cutting. "I was assaulted in your flagship cabin by a passenger you've rewarded with elite status. Your crew was unable to handle her. She threw proprietary, multi-million-dollar technology." She patted her backpack onto the floor. "And now I'm expected to sit here for 7 hours and work? No, the contract is clear. Safe passage, safe environment. You failed." Caroline Harrington, still sitting in 1A, was vibrating with a mixture of terror and rage. This is insane. You're a tech. You're grounding a whole plane just because it was a mistake. I thought it was my seat." Serafina didn't even look at her. "Captain, the flight is grounded." Captain Miller knew he was beaten. He was just a pilot. This was now a C-suite problem. He nodded grimly. "David, open the main door. Inform the gate agent we are deplaning. All passengers." He turned to the cabin and pressed the button for the intercom. His voice, usually a calm baritone of authority, was now tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. Due to a non-negotiable security and certification issue, this flight to London Heathrow is now cancelled. We will be deplaning all passengers and returning to the terminal. Globalis agents will be at the gate to assist with rebooking. We apologize for the extreme inconvenience." A wave of absolute fury washed through the entire aircraft. From first class to the last row of economy, a collective "What?" and "You've got to be kidding me" erupted. This wasn't a delay. This was a cancellation. Hundreds of people, vacations ruined, business meetings missed, connections lost. As the crew opened the doors, the deplaning process began. It was a walk of shame unlike any other. And as every single passenger, from first, business, and economy, walked past row 1, they saw the scene. They saw Serafina Vance standing calmly in the aisle, backpack on her shoulder. They saw the captain and purser standing guard. And they saw Caroline Harrington, the woman in the tweed blazer, still sitting in seat 1A, now being gently but firmly pulled to her feet by 2 uniformed Port Authority police officers. "No, please." Caroline was sobbing now. the facade of her entitlement shattering. "It was a misunderstanding. Please, I have to be in London." "You can explain that at the precinct, ma'am," one officer said, cuffing her hands behind her back. The other passengers, their faces grim, understood immediately. This woman, this one woman had done this. "You ruined my honeymoon," someone yelled from the economy line. "I'm missing my father's surgery, you selfish witch," shouted another. A businessman in a suit paused, looked Caroline dead in the face, and said, "I hope you know, Harrington and Associates just lost the Braxton account. My call, first thing tomorrow." Caroline's head snapped up. "What? You know?" "Oh, everyone knows you, Caroline," the man sneered. "And everyone's phone is recording." Caroline looked around. She was surrounded by a sea of smartphones, all pointed directly at her, their red record lights glowing like demonic eyes. The video of a cuffed, sobbing Platinum Elite member being dragged off a plane she had single-handedly gotten cancelled was already being uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram before she'd even reached the terminal. The tag, Marsha Globalis Karen, was born. Serafina was the first passenger off. She walked into the jet bridge and was met by a frantic, sweating man in a $5,000 suit, Robert Chen, the CEO of Globalis Air, who had apparently broken the land speed record driving from his home in Greenwich. "Seri," he panted, his face ashen. "Serafina, my God, I don't have the words. I am mortified." Serafina just looked at him. "You have a plane full of 300 angry passengers, Robert, and I still need to get to London." The scene in Terminal 7 was pure bedlam. Passengers from Flight 10, now officially cancelled, swarmed the Globalis gate desk, screaming at the agents, who could do nothing but offer rebookings on flights that were already full for the next 2 days. The air crackled with the fury of ruined plans. But Serafina Vance was not in the terminal. Robert Chen had personally escorted her through a private, crew-only elevator down to the tarmac, where a black Cadillac Escalade was waiting. They were now sitting in the Globalis Signature Private Lounge, an unpublished sanctuary reserved for royalty and heads of state. Robert was pacing, his phone buzzing non-stop on the marble coffee table. "I've already suspended the gate agent for letting her board without checking her pass properly," Robert was rambling, pouring Serafina a glass of water she hadn't asked for. "The crew, Maria and David, they're on paid leave pending review, though from your report they tried. They did well," Serafina cut in, her voice flat. "They were just outgunned. Don't punish them. In fact, send them a bonus. They had to deal with your Platinum Elite problem." Yes. Yes, of course." Robert sat down, wiping his brow. "Seri, the exposure on this, it's catastrophic. Vance AI's stock is tied to this launch. If the market opens and word is out that the Helios suite was uncertified—" "The suite is fine," Serafina said. "The airline isn't. You failed to provide a safe environment. That's the story. Your elite program has created a monster. You're rewarding Karens for their loyalty, and they think they own your planes." I know, we're re-evaluating it." "You're scrapping it," Serafina corrected. "Or you're finding a new avionics partner. Your choice." Robert stared at her. The ultimatum was clear. "We're scrapping it. Today." "Good." Serafina took a sip of water. "Now, the passengers, the 300 people back there. Their vacations are ruined. Their meetings are missed. This isn't their fault. It's your fault. And it's Caroline Harrington's fault. But you're the one with the brand." "What do you want me to do?" Robert asked, his voice small. "First, you are refunding every single ticket on that flight. In full, 100%. Second, you are giving every passenger from 1A to 42J a 50,000-mile voucher. Third, You are paying for their hotels tonight in New York and rebooking them on the first available flights, even if it's with your competitors. You will eat the cost. You will make them whole." Robert didn't even wince. He just nodded. "Done. I'll have my team action it now." "Finally," Serafina said, standing up. "I still need to be in London in 6 hours. My keynote is at 10 a.m. I can't be late." "Of course." Robert was already on his phone. "I have a Gulfstream GX50 on standby at Teterboro. It's fueled, staffed, and ready. It will get you to London City Airport in 6.5 hours, with a helicopter transfer to your hotel. It's the least we can do." "It is," Serafina agreed. "And Robert? This never happens again. My team is sending over our corporate implicit bias and de-escalation training modules. Your entire global staff, from pilots to gate agents, will be certified in it by Q1, or our contract is void." "Yes, Siri, thank you, thank you." As Serafina was escorted to the Escalade, she glanced at her phone. The incident was the #1 trending topic on Earth. The video of Caroline Harrington being cuffed and dragged past a plane load of booing passengers was everywhere. Her name was no longer a mystery. The internet, with its terrifying speed, had identified her. Caroline Harrington, Senior Vice President at Harrington and Associates Consulting, a mid-sized but powerful consulting firm in Boston. The karma was just getting started. The moment the main cabin door of Flight 10 was cracked open, the digital guillotine began its descent. While Serafina Vance was being quietly escorted by Robert Chen to a private lounge, the 300 furious, displaced passengers were flooding into Terminal 7. They were not just passengers, they were witnesses, and every single one of them was a broadcaster. Before Caroline Harrington had even been fully processed by the Port Authority police, the videos were live. It wasn't just one clip. It was a 360-degree composite of her disgrace. There was the first video, from a businessman in seat 2J, capturing her initial, sneering, "You're in my seat." There was the high-definition clip from the passenger in 3G, which clearly showed her grabbing Serafina's backpack and hurling it into the aisle. And then there was the masterpiece of her downfall, the long, uncut video of her being cuffed, screaming, "I'm Platinum Elite! You can't do this!" as the entire booing plane filed past her. The internet, a beast that starves for such a villain, feasted. The hashtag #NotSoGlobalistKaren was trending worldwide in under 20 minutes. But it was the amateur sleuths on Twitter and Reddit who delivered the killing blow. "That's Caroline Harrington," one user posted, 22 minutes after the incident. "SVP at Harrington and Associates in Boston." "Holy crap it is," another replied, posting a screenshot from the company's website. There she was, smiling in a stiff corporate headshot, wearing the exact same tweed blazer. The digital blood was in the water. Within an hour, the firm's Yelp, Google, and Glassdoor pages were not just being review-bombed, they were being digitally obliterated. "Racist SVP," one review read. "My consultant told me I was in her seat and then threw my laptop. 0 to tenor." At 2:05 a.m., in a dark, quiet mansion in Beacon Hill, Boston, Mark Harrington, CEO of Harrington and Associates, and more importantly, Caroline's brother-in-law, was jolted awake. His phone wasn't just buzzing. It was vibrating so violently on his antique nightstand that it sounded like a small engine. He grabbed it, his heart pounding. The screen was a waterfall of missed calls from his PR director, his COO, and every board member. A text from his PR chief was at the top. "Mark, wake up. We have a 5-alarm fire. It's Caroline. Go on Twitter. Now." "What now?" Mark mumbled, rubbing his eyes. He opened the app. His company's name was trending. He clicked it. He saw the video. He saw his sister-in-law, his own senior vice president, acting not just entitled, but, as he watched her throw the bag, unhinged. "Fool," he whispered. But then he read the replies. "Wait, does anyone know who the other woman is? I think, holy, that's Serafina Vance, CEO of Vance AI." Mark Harrington's blood turned to ice. He went from sleepy irritation to full, cold sweat panic. Serafina Vance. The Serafina Vance. Harrington and Associates had been trying to land a meeting with Vance AI for 3 years. They were the white whale. A contract with them would elevate his mid-level firm into the global big leagues. He had personally overseen a dozen failed pitches, and his sister-in-law had just physically assaulted her, on camera, over a seat. He didn't hesitate. He didn't call his brother, Richard. He didn't wait for an explanation. He called his emergency board. "She's fired," he said, his voice a low growl to the half-asleep board members on the call. Not a suspension, not a leave of absence. Terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and irreparable damage to the firm's reputation. "But Mark, the bylaws," one member started. "Bylaws!" Mark roared. "She just assaulted our #1 target client. She assaulted the single most important woman in technology. There is no firm left if we don't cut this cancer out right now. The vote is 100%. Draw up the papers. Send the email." At 4:05 a.m., as Caroline Harrington sat in a fluorescent-lit holding cell at JFK, her phone buzzed. She thought it was her husband, Richard, finally coming to get her. She looked at the screen. It was a PDF from her company's legal department. "Dear Miss Harrington, your employment with Harrington and Associates is terminated, effective immediately." She dropped the phone. No, that's not possible. Mark can't. He's family." She rattled the bars. Guard! I need to make a call. This is a mistake." The guard didn't even look up. But meanwhile, in the terminal, Arthur Braxton, the businessman who had recognized Caroline, was on the phone with his own COO. "That's right, the Braxton account," Arthur said, his voice grim as he stood at the chaotic rebooking counter. "Pull it, all 4 million. And I want a press release out by 9 a.m. Braxton Industries has severed its relationship with Harrington and Associates, effective immediately. Quote me directly. We cannot in good conscience be partners with a firm that employs, enables, and promotes individuals who demonstrate such appalling, racist, and entitled behavior. Yes, use those exact words. Let them know why." He hung up, just as the Globalis agent looked at him. "Sir, the best we can do is a flight tomorrow afternoon." Arthur just sighed. The damage was done. Back in the holding cell, Caroline's nightmare was just beginning to take shape. A Port Authority officer approached with a clipboard. "Caroline Harrington, you've been charged with 2 federal offenses: interference with a flight crew and simple assault. You'll see the judge in the morning." "Federal offenses," she whispered. The Platinum Elite defense was not working here. As if on cue, a different man in a sharp suit, clearly not a cop, approached the cell. "Mrs. Harrington?" "Yes," she said, thinking it was a lawyer her husband had sent. "I'm from the legal department of Globalis Air." He slid 2 documents through the bars. "This is a civil complaint. Globalis is suing you for the full cost of the cancelled flight, including fuel, landing fees, all 300 passenger refunds, and compensation vouchers. The total damages sought are $150,000. Caroline's knees buckled. "Furthermore," the man continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "this second document is a formal notice. You are hereby banned, for life, from Globalis Air and all SkyFirst Alliance partner airlines, including Air France, Delta, and 23 others. Any attempt to board our aircraft will be considered criminal trespassing. Good day." fired, charged with federal crimes, sued for nearly $2 million, banned from flying. She finally got her one phone call. She called her husband, Richard. Richard, thank God! You have to get me out of here. They fired me. The airline is suing us. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. Richard, she sobbed. Don't. Come. Home, he said, his voice flat. What? Richard, what are you talking about? It was a mistake. I thought it was my seat. It's 5 a.m., Carolyn, he said, his voice sounding hollow. I've already had 3 calls from the senior partners at my firm. My managing partner gave me a strong suggestion to take an indefinite leave of absence to manage my family's reputational crisis. My career is on fire because of you. You can fix this. Fix it. I'm trying to survive it. The Beacon Hill Country Club just held an emergency e-vote. Our membership has been revoked, citing the morality clause. The gate code to our community has been changed. My name is mud all over the world. You're not just an embarrassment, Caroline. You're a liability. Richard, I'm your wife. You're an anchor. I'm cutting the line. I've already transferred your things to a storage unit. A lawyer will be in touch. Don't call this number again. The line went dead. At that exact moment, 40,000 feet above the Atlantic, Serafina Vance's Gulfstream G650 cut a silent, smooth path through the pre-dawn sky. She had finished her call with her legal team and was now refining her keynote. The incident had given her an idea. She wasn't just going to talk about energy grids. She was going to talk about systems and what happens when they fail. She had already forgotten Caroline's name. By 9:15 a.m. London time, her jet had landed. A black Rolls-Royce was waiting on the tarmac. She was at the Savoy by 9:30 a.m. She showered, changed into a sharp, minimalist Armani suit, and reviewed her new opening. At 10 a.m. on the dot, she walked onto the main stage at the London Energy Summit. The entire auditorium, filled with 5,000 of the world's most powerful people, leaped to their feet. The standing ovation was thunderous, a wave of respect and admiration that washed over her. The news had traveled faster than her jet. They had all seen the video. They had seen her impossible calm, her lethal precision. She wasn't just a tech billionaire anymore. She was the woman who had, in one night, held entitlement accountable. She was the woman who had grounded a plane with a single phone call, and as she stood at the podium, a quiet, powerful figure against a massive screen, she proved that true power doesn't need to shout, and that karma, when it finally hits hard. The sun was rising over London as Serafina Vance's Gulfstream G650 began its final, silent descent toward the private landing strip at London City Airport. She hadn't slept. Instead, she had spent the 6-hour flight rewriting her keynote. The presentation on the Helios grid was still the centerpiece, but it now had a new, unplanned prologue. When she walked onto the main stage at the London Energy Summit at 10 a.m., she was met not just with applause, but with a roar. The 5,000 global leaders, investors, and engineers in the auditorium were on their feet. The Trauser Globalis Karen video had been the single most watched piece of media on the planet for the last 12 hours. They weren't just greeting a tech CEO, they were greeting a cultural icon. Serafina, dressed in a simple but sharp Armani suit, stood at the podium and let the applause wash over her. She didn't smile. She waited, projecting the same unshakable, quiet authority from the video. The room slowly quieted. "Good morning," she began, her voice crisp and clear. "My presentation today is about systems, the systems that power our world, and how we can make them smarter, faster, and more efficient. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But I find myself forced to first address a different kind of system, a social one, a system of perceived status, entitlement, and bias that we reward with platinum cards and priority boarding. But that, in reality, is deeply inefficient, unjust, and, as we saw last night, incredibly costly. A murmur went through the crowd. This was what they were waiting for. The incident on Flight 10 was not about one woman. It was not about one seat. It was the predictable failure of a system that is programmed to value the wrong things. A system that teaches certain people that their status gives them the right to harass, to assault, and to dehumanize others. She clicked to her first slide. It wasn't a graph. It was a simple, stark white screen with 2 words. Dignity is the new metric. My company, Vance AI, builds systems that learn, and last night we all learned a valuable lesson. That is why I am announcing today that Vance AI is developing a new open-source training module, the Dignity in Service program. We will be providing it, free of charge, to every single one of our global transportation and logistics partners. This module will use our simulation technology to train staff in de-escalation, implicit bias recognition, and the confident assertion of authority, regardless of a customer's status. Because a safe environment is not a luxury, it is a non-negotiable requirement. The applause was deafening. She had taken a moment of personal humiliation and, in one move, turned it into a billion-dollar business and PR masterstroke. She had not just grounded a flight, she had grounded an entire toxic culture. The rest of her keynote on the Helios grid was flawless, but it was the prologue that would be quoted in boardrooms for the next decade. While Serafina was changing the world, Caroline Harrington's world was ending. Her release on bail was a media circus. Dozens of cameras were thrust in her face as she was hustled out of the precinct, her tweed blazer now crumpled, her face bare of makeup and streaked with tears. The "I'm a Platinum Elite member," she had shrieked, was now the internet's favorite meme, remixed into songs and plastered on t-shirts. Her trial was swift. The evidence was absolute. The prosecution played the full, unedited video taken from multiple angles. They put a tearful Maria and a stoic David on the stand, both of whom recounted Caroline's escalating aggression. The businessman who had pulled the Braxton account testified that her behavior was not a one-off, but a pattern of entitlement he had witnessed at multiple corporate events. Caroline's defense was a pathetic attempt to reframe herself as the victim. "I was stressed," she claimed through sobs. "I hadn't slept. I am a target of cancel culture. This is a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by an online mob." The prosecutor, in his closing, simply played the clip of her throwing Serafina's backpack. "This is not cancel culture, Mrs. Harrington. This is consequence culture. This is the simple, overdue bill for a lifetime of believing you were better than everyone else. This is assault. This is interference. This is a crime." She was found guilty on all counts. The judge, making an example of her, delivered the sentence with cold precision: a $50,000 federal fine, 2 years of probation, and 500 hours of mandatory community service, cleaning the terminals at JFK. But that was just the appetizer for the main course of her karma. Globalis Air's $185 million a civil suit was a foregone conclusion. With her employment terminated, her assets were frozen. The beautiful Beacon Hill home, the seaside vacation house in the Hamptons, the designer wardrobe, the art collection, All of it was seized and auctioned off to pay the debt she owed the airline. The final, most brutal blow, however, came not from a judge, but from her husband. Richard Harrington, whose own career was now in tatters as partners at his law firm quietly shunned him, met her at the one-room, linoleum-floored apartment she was now renting. He wasn't there to comfort her. He was there to serve her. "Richard, please," she begged, grabbing at the sleeve of his custom suit. He pulled his arm away as if she were diseased. "You didn't just ruin yourself, Carolyn," he said, his voice dead. "You ruined my name. The Harrington name. For 20 years I built that name. And you set it on fire in 20 minutes for a seat you didn't even pay for. We can rebuild," she cried. "No, I can. You are a liability." He placed the divorce papers on her stained countertop and walked out, not looking back. The karma was complete. 6 months later, a former country club friend spotted her. Caroline was working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour convenience store, wiping down a coffee machine, her hands raw and chapped. She looked up, made eye contact for a split second, and saw the woman's look of horrified pity. Caroline turned away, her face burning. She had spent her life demanding to be seen. Now, her greatest wish was to be invisible. For Maria and David, the incident was also a turning point, but in a profoundly different way. Maria was at her kitchen table a week later, staring at a stack of bills. The largest was a final warning notice on her mortgage. Her husband's hours had been cut, and they were 3 months behind. She was terrified of losing her home. That afternoon, a FedEx courier delivered a flat, black envelope. There was no return address, just the Vance AI logo embossed in the corner. Inside, she found a thick, linen card. The note was handwritten in elegant, precise script. "Maria, thank you for your professionalism under duress. You were placed in an impossible situation, and you did your best to de-escalate. You deserved better support. A company's strength is not in its elite customers, but in its loyal, professional staff. Please accept this as a token of my personal gratitude. Serafina Vance." Beneath the note was a cashier's check. Maria's hands trembled as she read the number. It wasn't a random, large sum. It was for $284,512.18, the exact outstanding principal on her mortgage. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing with a relief so total it was physically painful. David's reward was professional. He was called into Robert Chen's office, convinced he was being fired for losing control of the cabin. "David," Robert said, gesturing for him to sit. "I've reviewed the reports. I've spoken with Ms. Vance. You were in a no-win situation." "Sir, you're being promoted." David froze. "What?" Ms. Vance was insistent that our new training program be led by someone who has survived the fire. "You are the new Senior Director of In-Flight Training and Standards. Your first task is to fly to Palo Alto, meet with the Vance AI team, and oversee the rollout of the Dignity and Service module for all 20,000 of our flight crew. You will ensure this never happens again." David was speechless. It was the job he'd wanted his entire career. Later that evening, his own Vance AI envelope arrived. Inside, the note was simple. For their education, SV. The check was for $250,000, almost to the dollar what he owed in tuition for his 2 children. 1 year passed. The Globalis Karen incident had, as Serafina predicted, become a corporate legend. Globalis Air's stock, after a terrifying initial plunge, had rebounded and soared. Robert Chen, fully embracing the new standard, had rebranded the entire airline. The Platinum Elite status was gone. In its place was a simple Globalis Rewards program. The new ad campaign was simple. We get you there with respect. Their new secret weapon was the Vance AI Dignity module. It was a mandatory 8-hour VR simulation. Every employee, from Robert Chen down, had to put on the goggles and stand in Maria's shoes, facing a hyper-realistic AI Caroline, who screamed, belittled, and threatened them. They had to navigate the encounter, using the new de-escalation techniques. It was brutal, humbling, and incredibly effective. Customer complaints for in-flight incidents dropped by 92% in the first 6 months. Serafina Vance was at JFK once again. Terminal 7, Globalis Flight 10 to London. She walked onto the plane, and the flight attendant at the door, a young, sharp-eyed woman named Chloe, glanced at her manifest and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Vance. It is a genuine honor to have you with us today. Seat 1A is right this way. Can I get you some water before we depart?" "Just water. Thank you, Chloe." Serafina smiled, settling into her seat. As the last passengers boarded, a large man in an expensive suit, Mr. Henderson, tried to shove his oversized roller bag into the first-class crew closet. "Excuse me, sir," Chloe said, stepping in front of him. Her voice was perfectly pleasant, but had a spine of steel. "This is fine," the man grunted. "I'm a million-miler. I've been flying this route for 20 years. It always goes here." Serafina watched, her gaze curious. This was the test. Chloe didn't flinch. "I understand your frustration, sir, and we genuinely thank you for that incredible loyalty. However, that closet is for crew safety equipment only, and FAA regulations, which are the same for everyone, require that bag to be stowed. It won't fit overhead." The man's face started to turn red. "This is ridiculous. Don't you know who—" "So here are our 2 options," Chloe cut in smoothly, not allowing him to escalate. "I can have my colleague here help you repack it, or we can check it to your final destination, complimentary, and I'll personally ensure it's the first bag off the plane. Which of those 2 solutions would you prefer?" The man, Mr. Henderson, was caught. He had been offered no room for argument, only a choice between 2 professional solutions. He stared at her, huffed, and then, miraculously, deflated. "Fine," he growled. "Check it." "Excellent choice, sir. Thank you so much for your cooperation." Chloe tagged the bag and had it whisked away in under 10 seconds. She returned to the galley and brought Serafina her water, catching her eye. There was a small, shared spark of understanding. Serafina took the glass, leaned back into her seat, and closed her eyes. The system was working. The plane wasn't just safe from a technical standpoint. It was safe from a human one. She had never been driven by revenge, only by a desire for order. And in the quiet hum of the engines, as the plane pushed back from the gate, Serafina Vance finally felt at ease. The new standard had been set. And that's the story of how one woman's entitlement wrote a check her privilege couldn't cash. Caroline Harrington thought her platinum status put her above everyone else. But she picked a fight with Serafina Vance, a woman who didn't just fly first class, she defined it. It's a powerful, real-life reminder that your status, your title, or your privilege means nothing when you're faced with quiet, unshakable power, and a whole lot of hard karma. What did you think of Serafina's response? Was it the ultimate boss move, or should she have just let it go? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of drama, revenge, and instant karma, you're in the right place. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to see what happens when you mess with the wrong person. Thanks for listening.